South Africa is caught up in the midst of an economic struggle with the world's highest unemployment rate and feeling the impact of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, increases in fuel prices. The issues with the country's electricity provider have simply exacerbated things. The CEO of South Africa's Black Business Council joins me to look at the issues. We'll also get into the conversation around climate financing on the continent. What does Africa really stand to gain? And Africa's tech ecosystem is booming. Today, we'll focus on fintechs and how they can help the continent bridge the financial inclusion gap. This is Business Edge. I'm Tolu Lokwe Adileru Balogun. Let's start with the African business headlines. The Nigerian Labour Congress has criticized the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation over the secrecy surrounding the subsidy of premium motor spirit, popularly known as petrol or PMS. The NLC has also alleged corruption in the subsidy scheme in its memo to the House of Representatives Ad Hoc Committee investigating the actual amount of PMS that Nigeria consumes daily. On the eastern part of the continent, a Kenyan high court has frozen more than 6.2 billion Kenyan shillings in 62 bank accounts belonging to Nigerian startup Flutterwave and 4 Kenyans over allegations that the funds are proceeds of card fraud and money laundering. The billions, which are spread in 5 banks, were frozen after the Assets Recovery Agency applied to block transfers or withdrawals pending the filing of a petition to have the money forfeited to the government. As part of efforts to safeguard retirees, Zimbabwe's Insurance and Pension Commission is keeping tabs on the amount of pension payments being paid out by pension funds. Grace Muradzikwa, an IPEC commissioner, said that the regulator was troubled by the issue of insufficient pension benefits. Albert Induna, the chairman of IPEC board, noted that the commission has made substantial progress in putting the Commission of Inquiry's recommendations into practice. Gausomina Viglioti, the vice president of the European Investment Bank, is on a 3-day visit to Cairo to talk with Egyptian officials about potential areas of cooperation, following up on ongoing initiatives and discussing projects that are in the works. She began her journey by taking part in the opening of the newest station on Cairo's Line 3, the Mansour Central Station, which the bank funded with 600 million euros. And those are our headlines. A quick time out and we'll get into our first story today. South Africans have had to contend with more hours of darkness as load shedding or power cuts in the country hit stage 6. The country's state-owned power utility, ESKOM, extended rolling power cuts this week, leaving some without electricity for more than 9 hours a day. Experts say that the utility's problems, including failure of its outdated coal-fired power plants, insufficient generation capacity, and corruption, were only made worse by striking ESKOM workers. With an economy hit hard by the world's highest unemployment rates, rising inflation, and external shocks, both small and large enterprises have been forced to shut down for extended periods of time or spend a significant amount of money on diesel to run generators. How badly hit are South African companies? What does load shedding cost the economy? Now joining me from Pretoria, South Africa is Kangi Matawani. He's the CEO of the Black Business Council. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me, Hangi.
Thank you very much for having us, and good morning on your side.
And we'll say good afternoon on your side as well. So let's start with the numbers, particularly for black businesses in South Africa. How much of South Africa's workforce work with what you would term or define as black businesses? And really, in terms of contribution, what are we looking at the contributions of black businesses to South Africa's GDP and economy overall?
If you look at the figures, for example, the loss to South Africa is around 12 billion rands every day, and out of that, I can say closer to half is black business contribution, because the Black Business Council represent Black people, it represents women, black youth, and people living with disabilities. So the contribution is around, I can say, around 6 billion that has been lost by the economy because of what you call load shedding, which is actually a power blackout. So the impact is extremely huge. And remember, we've got what we call the National Development Plan. The National Development Plan said if we want to put some dent into the economy and the unemployment rate that we have, we should create 11 million jobs by 2030. And as you are aware, now we're in 2022, and it said 90% of those jobs are supposed to be created by small businesses. And at this rate, small businesses, as you are aware, we are still trying to recover from the impact of COVID.
Yes.
The economy was basically closed for 2 to 3 years. The economy is still trying to recover. Small businesses are still trying to recover. And now we're hit with this because this, this does, on top of what is happening in Ukraine and Russia, it basically increased the cost of doing business. But the unfortunate part is that small businesses cannot afford renewable energy. They cannot afford to put solar plants. They cannot afford to buy generators. So they then resort to closing shop. As you correctly said, out of the 24 hours, if you lose 10 hours because of no electricity, what is it there that you have to do? You have to close shop and send employees home. And if this persists for a longer period, there's a possibility that the companies are going to start firing or retrenching employees. And that then is going to create a crisis because already we've got 75% youth unemployment. And if we increase that number, we are sort of creating a crisis for the country.
So it's interesting you touch on those sort of knockdown effects of the load shedding situation. And while the strike action by ESKOM workers made a bad situation worse, ESKOM's issues are historic. At this point in time, this load shedding has been going on, I think, more than 10 years now, about 11 years that South Africans have been experiencing load shedding. So you talked about businesses having to close down, laying off employees as well. You said that in terms of a crisis situation, but aren't we already seeing that happen now, particularly with the with the stage 6 load shedding that came into play last week?
Yes, you are absolutely correct. The issues of ESKOM are not new. We've been here since 2008, and we had hoped that by now things will have been sorted, but things seems to be getting worse, and hence we've been calling for the CEO of ESKOM to step down because he was appointed 2.5 years ago, and you'll know that any CEO, we cannot stabilize any company in 2 years' time. That means that CEO is not worthy of being a CEO. The issues of the strike, I think for us, we see those as excuses because the stage 4 does not start now with the strike. We've been having load shedding even before the strike. So I think the company is just using the strike as an excuse. The issue of corruption, I think everyone knows that we had a commission of state capture, and the state capture involved a lot of companies, but those companies are still operating well. So we also think that they are over exaggerating it. They are using it so that they cannot deliver, because the state capture is the issue of the past. You need to then say, where we are, how do we then solve the problem of making sure that South Africa has enough electricity? And until we have sorted out those issues, I don't think we will be able to solve the problem. And we know, and this is in the annual report of ESKOM, the month of July, every year we have the highest demand of electricity. And if they could not guarantee electricity supply in June. It means in July it's going to be worse. So even when the strike is done like now, we don't think that they're going to solve the problem. We think things are going to get worse. Hence, we're saying we need to see changes and bring people who are competent, people who are skilled, people who understand power generation to come and run ESKOM.
So let me take you up on that point, because you've said that the CEO has failed to keep his word that he would turn ESKOM around. In a recent interview, you also said that 18 months, as you said now, 2 years, is more than enough time to make significant changes. You're not only asking for the CEO to be fired, but also executives at ESKOM as well. Do you think that firing the executives would really make any change? Is it really about a change of guard or about the change of a system, a systematic failure here? You've made mention of the state capture controversy, the Zondo Commission. We've looked at that extensively as well. You could bring another CEO and you'd be right back in this same issue in another 18 months' time, because it's systematic rather than based solely on some of the issues around ESKOM.
Yeah, remember that the CEO, when he was appointed, he said to South Africans, please give me 18 months, and in 18 months, I will stabilize the system. And you know, South Africans were very, very, very understanding. And we said, no, we can stomach 18 months. Anyway, we've been stomaching this for more than close to 10 years. We can accommodate you for 18 months. And we went on with our lives. But instead of stabilizing the situation, things have been getting worse. If you look at, for example, last year we had a record number of blackouts. This year already, we're in June and we're already on stage 6. We may be stage 7, stage 8 this month. So what we're saying, let's bring people who got capabilities. If you look at, for example, if you look at the board, because we're also saying the board should be dissolved. When we look at the board of ESKOM, they are not people there who've got experience of electricity generation. So you've got as they say, we've got the blind leading the blind. When the CEO comes and make a presentation to the board, chances the board are not asking the right questions because they're also in the dark. Excuse the pun. So we need to get the people who understand what they are doing. And because if you get the person who understands what he or she is doing, they will be able to tell us what's going to happen in the next week, in the next month. But at the moment, we don't know. We wake up, there's no stage. 5 minutes later, they say we're going to stage 1. 10 minutes, stage 2, 3 minutes, stage 5. And you can't plan your life as a business person when you're running a business. You can't plan, because you need someone who knows that now in the next 2 weeks, this is going to be what's going to happen. This is going to be the state of electricity in the country. So that as businesses, you can then be able to plan and say, no, if we're not going to have electricity between 10 and 11 o'clock, then I'll give my employees a time of that time, and then they can come back at 12. But you don't know. You don't even know when you're going to have electricity, when you're not going to have electricity.
All right,
which points to the lack of planning and the lack of capacity and lack of competence.
So let's look at another issue, but we'll do that when we come back from the break. ESKOM's issues, as we've agreed, are quite historic, but how much of ESKOM's issues might also account or be responsible for such a high black unemployment rate in South Africa? And then also look at the next plan by the National Energy Regulator of South Africa to implement an average tariff increase. Where does the Black Business Council stand on that, and some other issues? We're going to continue the conversation in just a moment. Load shedding became more of a significant problem last week when the power utility introduced stage 6 load shedding. South Africa has only experienced this in 2019. Now, under stage 6 load shedding, 6,000 megawatts needs to be shed from the country's electricity system. And for consumers, the load shedding means that some are without power for as much as 9 to 8 hours a day. The conversation continues after this. Still with me on Business Edge is Hangi Matawani. He's the CEO of South Africa's Black Business Council. Now, we know that Black South Africans are more vulnerable to the issues of unemployment and job losses than any other groups in the country. And with South Africa having the world's highest unequal society, these issues get to be quite exacerbated. So, Hanky, let me bring you back into this. How much of ESKOM's issues, particularly, given how they tend to affect Black businesses more than others, as you've mentioned, they don't have the money, the excess money to buy generators, to install solar options or alternative options to electricity. How much of the ESKOM crisis do you think might be responsible for the 47.2% Black unemployment rate that South Africa experiences?
Yeah, remember the issue of ESKOM does not necessarily only affect small businesses. It also affects the confidence of outside investors, international investors, and even national investors to invest in the country. So, if for example, someone wants to open a smelter in South Africa now, they'll think twice. If someone wants to open the mine in South Africa, they'll think twice. So if you want to open a manufacturing plant in South Africa, you'll think twice. And that's what we're saying. We really need changes because we cannot afford that, because it means less manufacturing companies, less mining companies, means that the rate of unemployment will go up, because those big companies, they also they also employ Black South Africans, and they also employ young people. So we really need to solve the issue of electricity and ESKOM, because it's got so many related impacts and effects. So it is basically affecting the entire economy. We will be having the rating agencies in the next week or so, and I suspect they're going to downgrade the country, mainly because of ESKOM. And if you look at it from a policy point of view, it means ESKOM is also introducing policy uncertainty into the economy, and then that is very, very serious. Hence, we are saying to our state president, he really needs to do something, because if he does not do something, this may affect his own legacy as a president.
So we're hearing that the National Energy Regulator is expected to implement an average tariff increase of about 7.47% starting in July. And as you mentioned, July is the month that you tend to get the highest demand for electricity, but June has been very, very bad. So expectation is that there is the potential for South Africa to even touch stage 7 load shedding in the coming weeks. So where does the Black Business Council stand on this planned increase, especially at a time of high unemployment, the Ukraine-Russia crisis, as well as increasing living and fuel prices? We know just this week it was announced that the fuel subsidy would be removed as well. So things are just going to be hitting South Africans hard in the next few weeks. Where does the Black Business Council stand on this?
You're correct. The things are just basically getting worse, and the impact on the consumer, because what businesses do, they then incur all these costs, but then they pass them to the end user. And the end user is not coping. So we've been appealing to our government to say we really need to do something. The tariff of the increased tariff that is there has been agreed a long time ago. So there's no way it's going to be reduced. But there may be other places like to reduce the fuel price by reducing the levies and all those. So at least you can bring some relief to employees and relief to the end user and the general public, because things are actually getting worse. And with the load shedding, people may just start losing jobs. And the challenge is that what will then happen, the rate of crime may just also go up, because people are trying to find ways of surviving.
So when you look at all of this, what support do Black businesses in South Africa need? We know, of course, the country isn't really adverse to giving some kind of support, some kind of benefits to different groups, and that was happening during COVID-19. But we're out of that, facing a different crisis now. So what support are Black businesses receiving? What support do they really need from the government at this time?
Black businesses have always and I think they'll always need two things: access to funding so that they can expand, but importantly, access to procurement opportunities or access to the markets. So we were discussing various legislative amendments. For example, we've got what we call the public procurement bill that we're busy discussing, and it's looking at how can we use state procurement to support black businesses, to support women-owned businesses, support youth-owned businesses, to support businesses owned by people living with disabilities. Those are the type of support that we need as black businesses, and then we're working on that to make sure that it becomes law, because once it's law, it's easier to implement rather than trying to implement that something that is not there, because the people who work for the state and state institutions, they can only implement legislation. Hence, we are pushing this to be for what we call a set aside for small businesses and black businesses to be put in law, so that the people who are working for state can then implement it and give or set aside a certain percentage of the state procurement to support small business. Because also, as I said, for us to be able to create jobs, is mainly small businesses that will be able to help us to create jobs. It's not going to be big businesses.
Very true. And finally, before I let you go, in May, President Ramaphosa announced that he was appointing a Black Economic Empowerment Advisory Council. So I want to know, before I let you go, do you have faith that establishing this council can really make a difference for Black businesses in South Africa?
We do have faith, and the council already met this week. The council will be meeting again next month to make sure that it starts the job, because appointment is one thing, but what is actually needed is for the council to start with the job and start with this work of advising the president what wants to be done. So we've been agitating for the appointment of this council, and we're going to continue to put pressure on the council to deliver what's supposed to deliver, because we're sitting 28 years into democracy, but the black people still own less than 5% of the economy. And that cannot be sustainable. It's a threat to democracy. So we need to change it.
All right, so we'll leave the conversation at that. Hangi Metawani, thank you so much for joining me today on Business Edge.
Thank you very much.
All right. Our conversation will continue to follow, because as Africa's most industrialized economy, one that also has record high unemployment and unfortunately a history of inequality, South Africa's positive changes and of course advancements can also help the rest of the continent, particularly the Southern African region. You're watching Business Edge. We have international business news coming up. We'll also be talking about climate financing, and of course we'll touch on the fintechs, how they could be the ones to really save all of us when it comes to financial inclusion. Stick around.